it was a situation where it didn't matter what we did. If I twiddled a couple of knobs and made something sound weird, and it was thought, wow, that's cool, let's do that, because there were no rules.
Producer Eddie Kramer knows a thing or two about the music industry, with a career that has spanned decades and a profile that includes iconic names like Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Kiss, and the Rolling Stones. But behind these celebrated collaborations lie experiences, struggles, and challenges he faced with some of your favorite bands. Join us as Kramer names the most difficult bands to work with. Eddie Kramer has worked with some of the biggest names in rock history. He is recognized as one of the iconic producers who helped shape the sound of a generation. With decades of experience in the studio, Kramer has seen it all. The talent, the chaos, the perfection, the struggles artists come into the studio with, and the behind-the-scenes mess they create. While many artists respected his work, not every recording session went smoothly. Some bands brought challenges that pushed even a seasoned producer like Kramer to his limits. He has witnessed the very heart of rock and roll unfold before his eyes. From long nights spent with Jimi Hendrix in the studio to the early days of Led Zeppelin, Kramer has worked alongside musicians who shaped the sound of a generation. Bringing these groundbreaking recordings to life was never a smooth path. Many of the artists Kramer recorded were not only gifted, but also brought personal storms into the studio. From substance use to clashing egos and extreme perfectionism, all of these put together often tested the limits of his patience and endurance. Kramer has never spoken unkindly about the musicians he worked with, but when asked to reflect on the most demanding sessions, his answers reveal a world where it felt like their creative genius was often on the edge of collapse. Kramer was far more than an engineer. Many times he became the glue holding everything together. He was more like the calm voice in a room full of chaos, either bringing peace when tempers are high or the only reason a session didn't completely fall apart. Among the bands that challenged Kramer, Led Zeppelin stands out uniquely. Led Zeppelin's challenge came from another direction. Kramer worked as the engineer on Led Zeppelin II, an album that played a crucial role in stabilizing the band's legendary status. But the circumstances under which it was made were not an easy one. The group was almost constantly traveling, which meant the album was put together in bits and pieces, done during brief periods between concerts and tours. We were putting the album together in different studios, grabbing whatever time we could find between shows, Kramer recalled. At the center of this creative storm was Jimmy Page, the mastermind behind Zeppelin's distinctive sound.
Jimmy's the director. He had all the ideas and all the stuff about how he thought it could sound, but then
Page's focus on detail could slow down the process entirely. Jimmy was particular about every element, every single note, every sound had to fit his mental picture, Kramer explained. This unwavering pursuit of perfection shaped Zeppelin's iconic sound, but it also stretched recording sessions late into the night. Kramer often found himself adjusting endlessly to Page's demands as small details were refined over and over again. There were moments when tensions ran high, particularly when Page sensed that the recordings were falling short of his expectations. If the sound wasn't matching what Jimmy imagined, we would keep going, doing another take and another, Kramer said. Though it was draining at times, Kramer had great admiration for Page's dedication. It was this relentless work ethic that helped Zeppelin create music that continues to inspire listeners to this day. Switching to Kiss, Kramer encountered a completely different kind of struggle with the iconic band. He worked with Kiss on several projects, including the hugely successful Love Gun and Alive 2 albums, but inside the studio, things were far from perfect. The main source of conflict came from within the group itself.
And I see Gene and Paul walking up and down the hallway and doing their thing. And they had a record that they did called Wicked Lester. But it was freaking terrible. I mean,
Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons were the leaders, making most of the decisions and setting the band's direction. Unfortunately, this often left Ace Frehley and drummer Peter Criss feeling overlooked. There was always a struggle for control happening behind the scenes, Kramer recalled. Even though Frehley and Criss were key to the band's sound, they were often pushed into the background when it came to important decisions. This imbalance affected the recording sessions, where Stanley and Simmons often messed up the process, sometimes ignoring what would have been best for the songs themselves. Kramer admitted, "It was tough because you had all this raw talent in one room, but the egos kept tripping things up." Among the members of Kiss, Ace Frehley was especially unpredictable, known for his offbeat charm and incredible guitar skills. Frehley's behavior could go so wildly from day to day, largely due to his struggles with strong drinks and substance use.
This is late. Ace Frehley, I love him dearly. So Ace walks in, and I swear to God, this guy was so thin, if you turned him sideways, he would disappear, you know.
By the time Kramer produced Frehley's solo album in the year 1978, Frehley's wild nature had reached its peak. Ace was a phenomenal guitarist, absolutely, but you could never be sure which version of him would show up at the studio. Kramer shared, "Some sessions went smoothly, with Frehley delivering soaring melodic guitar parts that reminded everyone why he was a rock legend. Other days were much harder. There were times when Frehley arrived so under the influence that playing was impossible. These challenges were not limited to technical problems. They often required Kramer to step into a psychological role as well. With Frehley, he often had to carefully go through the guitarist's moods, knowing when to push and when to step back."
He plugs in and it's like, fuck, this is the guy. I mean, he was the heart and soul of Kiss, I think, certainly from a guitar playing point of view.
At this point, there is no doubt that his job was not always easy. He often found himself in the middle of wild sessions, surrounded by artists who were full of talent, but also full of chaos. When he worked with the Rolling Stones, he quickly learned that their sessions were coming with their troubles too, and nothing close to calm. He was part of the team during the making of Beggar's Banquet and Let It Bleed, two albums that became key to the band's sound in the late 1960s. Keith Richards was especially unpredictable. Keith was a genius, but he did not work by any schedule, Kramer explained. Richards often showed up at the studio at strange hours, expecting everyone to be ready the moment he arrived. While this freestyle led to some of the band's best work, it also made it hard to keep the sessions under control. Brian Jones, another member of the Stones, was going through a hard time when Kramer worked with the group. Jones was struggling with substance use as well, and his role in the band was fading so fast. Brian was hardly there, in body or mind. Kramer said, "It was clear to everyone in the studio that Jones was on his way out." This unspoken truth created a strange, heavy mood during the sessions. The Stones had always worked under pressure, but during this time, the cracks inside the band were becoming too big to hide. Aside from the Rolling Stones, Cactus was another band that gave him headaches, though for very different reasons. The group had all the right pieces to become a great blues rock band. They had energy, talent, and passion. But unlike Led Zeppelin, who had Jimmy Page to lead the way, Cactus had no one to keep them focused. Their studio time often turned into loud parties, with more drinking than recording. Kramer remembered, "There were days when we were lucky to get 1 or 2 good takes, and that was called a good day." Even though the band had moments of greatness, their lack of focus in the studio held them back from becoming as big as their potential promised. As for one of the biggest, Jimi Hendrix, even with his close friendship with Kramer, it was not always easy to work with him either. Hendrix was always searching for new sounds and ideas. This drive to try new things meant that the sessions were often long and full of experiments. Jimmy wanted to try everything, different amps, different microphones, layering 10 or 15 guitar tracks just to hear what worked, he explained. For a producer who loved fresh ideas, this was exciting, but it also meant that the sessions could go on for hours or even days without rest. Hendrix was also very hard on himself. Even after playing a brilliant guitar solo, he often wanted to do it again, chasing something even better. "I would tell Jimmy, 'We got it, this is the take,' but he would still ask for another try," Kramer shared. This endless push for perfection was part of what made Hendrix special, but it also made the sessions exhausting for everyone involved. What made Kramer stand out in his career was not just his skill with the machines, but also his patience with the artists. Whether he was dealing with Keith Richards' odd working hours, Brian Jones's troubles, Cactus's wild behavior, or Hendrix's never-ending search for perfection, Kramer stayed calm and steady. He had a way of letting the musicians explore their ideas without letting the sessions fall apart. Aside from that, he also had a remarkable ability to handle the human side of the job. With Ace Frehley, he became part producer, part counselor, learning how to put together great performances from a musician who could be his own worst enemy. With Kiss, he was often the stabilizing force, ensuring that the music didn't get lost in the noise of power plays and personality clashes. And with Led Zeppelin, he became an essential partner to Page, helping to bring the guitarist's exacting vision to life. Kramer later reflected on his time in the studio with a sense of modesty. When you are in the middle of it, you are just trying to get through the session and capture the best performance you can, he said. You don't always know at the time that you are part of something historic. For him, it was not just about making records. It was about helping the musicians give the best they had, even when their behavior was working against them. With the Rolling Stones, he learned how to work around a band that lived in chaos. With Cactus, he had to pull magic out of sessions that sometimes felt more like a wild party than a professional recording. With Hendrix, he learned how to support a genius who was never satisfied, always pushing the limits. Each artist or band brought its kind of challenge, and Kramer found a way to help them shine. When it came to Kiss as a band, he was often in the middle of power struggles, trying to keep the focus on the music rather than the constant conflict for control. Returning to Led Zeppelin, he faced an entirely different set of pressures. This part-by-part work approach could have resulted in a bad album, but his steady hand and Page's intense vision kept the project on track. As for Jimmy Page, his pursuit of the perfect sound meant that no detail was too small. Whether it was the tone of a guitar, the placement of a microphone, or the exact balance between instruments, Page would not settle until everything aligned with his artistic vision. Jimmy knew exactly what he wanted, and we would go over parts again and again until it was just right, Kramer explained. Although this process could be mentally and physically exhausting, it was also part of what made that particular album a massive hit. With Kiss, the obstacles came more from interpersonal differences. He had to manage a room full of big personalities, each with their idea of what the band should sound like. Stanley and Simmons were determined to guide the group's direction, while Frehley and Chris often felt shut out. Kramer had to walk a fine line, giving each member a voice while still moving the sessions forward. In the case of Ace Frehley's solo project, he faced one of his greatest tests as a producer. Frehley's natural talent was undeniable, but his battle with substance use made him unpredictable and sometimes unreliable. There were sessions when Frehley delivered breathtaking performances, his guitar work shining with energy and creativity, but there were also days when he could barely function, leaving him to pick up the pieces and find ways to make progress despite the setbacks. Through it all, Kramer's true talent was his ability to stay strong when things got tough. Many producers can handle the technical side of recording, but few can handle the people behind the music. He had the rare gift of doing both. He knew when to step back and let the artists explore, and he knew when to step in and guide them toward a finished song. In the end, his work helped shape some of the most important albums in rock history. But for him, it was never about fame or awards. It was about getting the job done and helping the musicians create something lasting. At the time, you were just trying to make it through the day, Kramer said. It's only later that you realize you were part of something big. Kramer's story is not just about music. It is also about survival, about making it through long nights, difficult artists, and moments when everything felt ready to fall apart. He did not just record great music. He helped hold it together when the people making it were at their most difficult. Without his steady hand, many of those famous songs and albums might never have been finished. Growing up in South Africa, Eddie Kramer was shaped by diverse sounds and a deep curiosity for music. Possibly, his early passion for experimenting with recording gave him the patience, creativity, and technical skill that later helped him handle the genius and chaos of rock's greatest legends. But how did a curious young boy from South Africa become the man trusted to shape the sound of rock legends? Edwin H. Kramer was born on the 19th of April in the year 1942 in Cape Town, South Africa. He grew up in a household that deeply appreciated both music and art. His parents, Sonny and Minna Kramer, decided to move to London in the early 1960s due to political reasons. When Eddie was just 4 years old, he began learning how to play the piano. Although the piano remained his favorite instrument, he also experimented with the violin and cello. He later studied classical piano at the South African College of Music. While he was still a student, his interests started shifting towards jazz and rock music, a change his father did not welcome. At the age of 19, about 6 months after his parents relocated, Kramer followed them to London. There, he began recording jazz bands in a basic home studio, built sound systems into vintage furniture, and set up music systems for the Soho Record Centre, a major record store chain in London at the time. In the year 1962, Eddie got his first job in the recording industry at Advision Studios. A year later, he joined Pi Studios, where he helped with mobile recordings of classical music and worked with artists like the Kinks, the Searchers, the Undertakers, Petula Clark, and Sammy Davis Jr. By the break of 1964, he started KPS Studios, which was taken over the following year by Regent Sound. This studio had previously hosted the Rolling Stones for their first album. Kramer was then given the responsibility to help design and manage a new 4-track studio. At this studio, the Beatles recorded Fixing a Hole, which appeared on their 1967 album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Kramer also engineered 2 of the Beatles' successful singles that later featured on Magical Mystery Tour, All You Need Is Love and Baby You're a Rich Man. By 1967, Kramer was working at Olympic Studios, where he engineered albums for the Rolling Stones, Small Faces, Traffic, and began a key collaboration with Jimi Hendrix. Kramer became a vital part of Hendrix's musical vision, working closely with him on all 4 albums released before Hendrix's tragic passing in 1970. These included Are You Experienced, Axis, Bold as Love, Electric Ladyland, and Band of Gypsies. In 1968, Kramer moved to New York to continue working with Hendrix. At first, he worked out of the record plant, and then as an independent producer and engineer. During this time, he worked on the first Johnny Winter album and engineered the second album by Led Zeppelin, beginning a series of 5 albums he would eventually contribute to. In 1969, Kramer and his team recorded the legendary Woodstock Festival over a sleepless 3-day period, documenting iconic performances that were later featured in both the film and soundtrack album titled Woodstock, Music from the original soundtrack, and more. In the early 1970s, Kramer collaborated with architect John Storick to build Electric Lady Studios, a cutting-edge studio designed for Hendrix, which cost $1 million to construct. Kramer served as the director of engineering there from 1970 to 1974. He produced Carly Simon's debut album and worked on albums for Sha Na Na and Peter Frampton. Additionally, he engineered music by Lena Horne, Dionne Warwick, and David Bowie, including Bowie's albums David Live and Young Americans. The song Fame, which featured John Lennon on rhythm guitar, became a #1 hit. In 1971, he mixed Humble Pie's double live album, Performance Rockin' the Fillmore, featuring Steve Marriott and Peter Frampton. That same year, he worked on Larry Coryell's jazz fusion album, Barefoot Boy, and Curtis Mayfield's double album, Curtis Live, his first solo release after leaving the Impressions. In 1973, he mixed Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy and began a long-term collaboration with the rock band Kiss. He had earlier helped them produce a demo that led to their first record deal. Over the years, he worked on several of their albums, including Alive, Alive 2, Love Gun, among many others, and Ace Frehley's self-titled solo album, which included the hit New York Groove. In 1973, Kramer also worked on the live Derek and the Dominoes album in concert and co-produced Jobriath's debut album. The following year, he co-produced Jobriath's final album, Creatures of the Street. In 1975, Kramer left Electric Lady Studios and became an independent engineer. That year, he worked on the Rolling Stones' live album, Love You Live, Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti and the Song Remains the Same, and Peter Frampton's Frampton Comes Alive, which went on to sell over 14 million copies, making it the highest-selling album of 1976. He also mixed Bad Company's third album, Run with the Pack. During the 1980s, he worked with a diverse set of musicians. He produced albums for blues legend Buddy Guy, classical guitarist John Williams, the Kentucky Headhunters, and rock and metal bands such as Whitesnake, Icon, Pretty Maids, Fastway, Alcatraz, and Anthrax. By the break of 1987, he produced Among the Living for Anthrax, which included the UK top 10 single I Am the Law. Aside from producing music, he also had other achievements. In September of 1992, Kramer co-authored a book with John McDermott titled Hendrix, Setting the Record Straight. The book relied on Kramer's close work with Hendrix and included interviews with several of the people involved in Hendrix's life and career. The following year, Kramer produced and engineered the tribute album Stone Free, a tribute to Jimi Hendrix, featuring a range of musicians, including Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, among many others. Proceeds from the album raised $750,000 for music and dance scholarships. In 1994, he released a two-part video series titled Adventures in Modern Recording. It featured interviews with Les Paul, who had pioneered modern recording techniques. That same year, he also produced a single by the Spin Doctors for the Woodstock '94 festival and worked on Buddy Guy's album Slippin' In, which won the Grammy for Best Blues Album in 1995. Kramer also produced Buddy Guy's album with the Saturday Night Live Band, which received a Grammy nomination in 1996. After a legal battle in 1995, the family of Jimi Hendrix regained the rights to his recordings. Since then, Kramer has served as co-producer for all authorized Hendrix releases. He worked on a second tribute album, In From the Storm, released in 1995. In 1997, he also produced Paul Rodgers' third studio album, Now. 2 years later, he won a Grammy for his work on the video album Band of Gypsies by Jimi Hendrix. In the year 2002, Kramer collected another Grammy for engineering The Game of Love, a collaboration between Carlos Santana and Michelle Branch. The song also won for Best Pop Collaboration with vocals. In 2003, he also worked on the soundtrack for the documentary Festival Express, which included performances by Janis Joplin, Buddy Guy, and among others. By the break of 2004, Kramer had several projects related to Jimi Hendrix. He partnered with Digitech to create a guitar effects pedal that replicated Hendrix's signature sounds. He also remastered Hendrix albums and remixed the Woodstock performance in 5.1 surround sound. In 2006, he again collaborated with Digitech, this time creating a guitar effects pedal for Brian May. That year, galleries in Santa Monica, Hollywood, and Rotterdam showcased Kramer's photography of musicians in action. In 2007, his photography was again displayed in galleries located in Santa Fe and Beverly Hills. Throughout his journey, Eddie Kramer built a legacy defined by creativity, technical skill, and a deep passion for music. From working with some of the most legendary rock artists of all time to shaping the sound of modern recordings, his influence can be seen and heard across decades of music history. Throughout all these sessions with these iconic bands, he played a quiet but crucial role. His job was not just to record notes and sounds, but to create an environment where creativity could thrive, even under the most chaotic conditions. Kramer's calm presence and deep musical understanding made him an important part of the process. Eddie Kramer's stories of what he had to face behind the scenes provide a clear picture of the unpredictable world of rock and roll recording. It's easy to listen to the final albums and hear only the brilliance. What we rarely see is the patience, endurance, and emotional work required to bring those records to life. He was the one who stood in the middle of it all, turning moments of chaos into music that still resonates today. Even though he has generally avoided criticizing the artists he worked with, His memories reveal the countless challenges that came with recording some of rock's greatest albums. He was more than just the person behind the mixing board. He was the bridge between chaos and creation, helping musicians turn raw inspiration into timeless art. What are your best projects from Eddie Kramer? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.